Welcome to the Pacey Performance Podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Director of Medical Services at the San Antonio Spurs, Phil Coles. This episode of the Pacey Performance Podcast is sponsored by Valve Performance, the team behind the NordBord hamstring testing system. So the NordBord is the fastest and easiest, most accurate way to measure hamstring strength in under 90 seconds. So the NordBord gives you the right information so you can make the right decisions for your players at the right time. So it's already in use by over half the Premier League and dozens of other elite teams around the world. So the NordBord testing system is on its way to becoming the gold standard for measuring and monitoring hamstring strength. So if you are interested in getting to know anything more about the NordBord, you can visit Vald Performance, that's VALD performance.com, to find out more. Thanks for tuning in to episode 95 of the Pacey Performance Podcast. So today we've got a great chat with Phil at the San Antonio Spurs. So just before I get into the chat with Phil, just want to say a massive thanks to Val Performance and Coach Me Plus for sponsoring the episode today. So as part of the bi-weekly sponsorship with Coach Me Plus, they're just going to provide a couple-minute segment which is going to really complement the Weightlifting Derivatives chat I had with Tim Suckermel a couple of weeks ago. So I hope you enjoy both the little segment from Coach Me Plus and the full interview with Phil Coles. So I'll chat to you soon and hope you enjoy.
In this segment, we're going to talk about weightlifting derivatives and their application to performance training. In team sports, especially team sports that have implements in the athlete's hand, golf, baseball, tennis, hockey, lacrosse, all sports that require a really good amount of wrist health, sometimes turning the bar over has a cost-benefit analysis that sometimes the cost outweighs the benefit. I'm not saying that you should never turn the bar over with these athletes, but especially in season, it might be beneficial to do weightlifting derivatives. There's been a lot of work that's come out in the last few years from the likes of Brad DeWeese and Tim Suckermel, and Brad's coined the term of surfing the curve, where you can surf the force velocity curve without turning the bar over. And some of these weightlifting derivatives include things like cleans or snatches from the power position or the mid-thigh position, whichever phrase you're familiar with, snatching or clean pulls from the top of the knee or just below the knee or even from the floor. So it's like a deadlift, but then you have the transition period, the double knee bend, where you come into the power position and it's just like a clean, but instead of turn the bar over, you just shrug your shoulders. And this is, I found, to be very beneficial, especially in season where there's a high level of fatigue, where the wrist health is so much more important for athletes that have implements in their hand. And so this allows you to get your overload, whether it be for high force and low velocity, or high velocity and a lower amount of force, depending on whatever your goal of the training session or the training block may be. And it allows the athlete to save off some of the wrist harm that could be incurred by turning the bar over. Another benefit that I've found with weightlifting derivatives is it's a time saver. When you go to turn the bar over, there's a certain amount of skill that's involved and a certain amount of mentality that athletes, I think, have when they need to pull themselves under the bar. And by doing the weightlifting derivatives, you get the triple extension, you get the push through the floor, pull, however you want to phrase it. You get that stimulus, but you don't have to worry about turning the bar over, and you can spend your time on getting different movements, different exercises, or some different points within the training session. So hopefully you can give the weightlifting derivatives a try. Check out some research from Tim Suckermel and Brad DeWeese on different weightlifting derivatives and how they may help your program.
To get your weekly dose of applied sports science updates, go to CoachMePlus.com and subscribe to our weekly newsletter. That's CoachMePlus.com.
Thanks for tuning in to the Pacey Performance Podcast. So, got a really exciting guest on this evening or this afternoon in Phil's case, in Phil Coles, coming from Texas. So, welcome to the podcast, Phil.
G'day, mate. How are you?
I'm absolutely great. Yeah, I'm good, mate. So, for anyone that doesn't know who you are, I just want to give a little bit of information on yourself and maybe what you're currently doing.
Okay, I'm an Australian, obviously, although I'm in Texas at the moment. I'm physiotherapist trained and sports physiotherapist in particular. I've evolved, I guess, over my career through a number of sports. I now work in a management role, leading a combined performance and medical team. I started in Australian football, or soccer as they call it over here in the UK, in the US. I worked with the national team for a number of years and then moved into European football, where I worked for a few years. I returned to Australia to work in rugby league, which was the sport I actually grew up with. And then by way of events, ended up over here with the San Antonio Spurs in Texas in the NBA, which for me was a different challenge, a different sport, a different culture, but one that I've really enjoyed.
So what was your role at Liverpool?
So at Liverpool, I was head of medical services. So I was working as a hands-on physiotherapist, but also managing all the physiotherapists, masseurs, anything to do with the medical side, working hand in hand with Darren Burgess, who was leading the performance team at that time.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. Did he? Who came first?
We came together.
Okay.
We were actually with the national team together in the two similar roles, and then we went essentially as a team to Liverpool with Dr. Bruckner as well. And Dr. Bruckner was the department lead, I guess, in combining the medical and performance team, and I led the medical arm, and Berger led the performance arm.
Okay. So how long ago was it that you went to San Antonio?
I came here in September 2014, so the last two full seasons I've done, and I'll now move into my third season next year.
Okay, nice. So the first thing I want to chat about is a recent article that you put out with regards to high performance teams, and it's something that I discussed recently on another podcast, kind of off the air, with the kind of popularity of the term high performance. But I just wanted to get into a bit of depth on your first on the article and your views on it a little bit deeper. What's your kind of definition of a high performance team?
I guess I'm not too hung up on the terminology of high performance unit or high performance team. I think it's the idea that you've got athletic development staff, predominantly strength and conditioning coaches, you've got sports scientists, and you've got sports medicine staff. And the grouping of those three together to work as one group, hand in hand in an integrated way, is really important for the success of each of them, And the grouping of those three areas, to me, makes up what you could call a high performance unit. But that's essentially the people within a club who are there to ensure that players can physically perform to their maximum level as often as possible.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that kind of stood out for me in the article was the setting of goals for the high performance team. Do you just want to talk to us a little bit about, firstly, how you go about that, how maybe you've gone about that in the past, or maybe how you go about that now, or just your general views on the setting of goals within the high performance team itself?
I think the setting of goals is really important for a number of reasons. I mean, if you're in professional sport, and I've been very lucky to be full time in professional sport, different sports for the last 10 years or so at least. It's a very results driven business, and changes can happen at a club or a team because a team didn't perform well in a particular season. In terms of results on the field or on the court or on the pitch, and when that's the case, sometimes changes are made that aren't always for the best. Sometimes those changes are a little bit too reactive. So by setting goals that are more defined to what we can specifically contribute to, we can be a little bit more fairly accountable to our programs. So I always say that team results and player availability are the two overriding goals of a high performance unit. We contribute. We're not the most important people to contribute to whether the team wins or not. The talent of your coaches and your players is the overriding factor there, but we certainly contribute in some way to helping that. And of course, we contribute in some way to keeping players available to play. So they're our overriding goals. But because there are so many influences on those goals that are out of our control, we need to have more specific goals at each step in our process. And then if we have those specific goals, it allows us to be much more objective about if we're achieving them and to be much more accountable in a fair way.
So how detailed are you getting with these goals? I mean, you hear a lot about when you come to the end of the season, there's kind of injury stats, and obviously people are jumping on the kind of Leicester City bandwagon, and that's getting obviously a lot of publicity. And then what do you kind of judge? How do you judge yourself as a team at the end of the season? You're looking at different aspects of the season, and what makes you give yourselves kind of pat on the back?
Well, we try not to give ourselves too many pats on the back because that's the first step to setting yourself up for a fall. As soon as you're happy with how well you did something. I mean, the big picture goals are there for everyone to see. What was the team's injury rates and what was the team's results, and so of course we look at them, and we try to look at them even a little bit more specifically to say, okay, it's not just team's availability, but it's quality of players who are unavailable. So in our stats here, we present our availability relative to everyone else in the league. We present our availability or the cost of our unavailability in terms of dollars paid to players who weren't available compared to everyone else in the league. And in US sports, it's a little bit unique because that information is publicly available. We have a scouting system who obviously give performance ratings to players, so we can also compare then loss of potential performance rating due to injuries. So we look at bigger picture to compare ourselves against the league, in a number of ways, and that's important without a doubt. But to me, more important is that all the processes we put in place to try and achieve those results have individual goals along the way. If we decide that a particular strengthening exercise is going to make our players more durable for the sport we're playing, then we need to have a way to measure, is that particular exercise firstly getting done regularly enough with players, and then are we seeing objective improvements because of that? And if we see those two boxes ticked, then we can assume that they're going to contribute to our overall result, which is obviously what most people are clutching at. But if those two boxes are ticked, we can be relatively happy. Now, if we tick those two boxes year upon year and our overall result is still poor, then of course we need to change the sub goals that we're ticking along the way. But we try to make everything as systematic and as objective as possible to help provide the best environment to achieve that overall result. And while the overall result is what we all want and what we all need, it's not the defining result for the success of our group.
So how much influence do your players or current players or in the past get on defining their own goals?
They get a lot. I mean, I try, if we're talking about individual player development in terms of physical development of a player, or if we're talking about rehab post-injury, I try to involve the player very specifically in the goals that we're setting for them. Because I've learned over time and with experience that the more engaged a player is, the more likely they are to achieve those goals. And if they've had some input into that, they're clearly going to be more engaged. So, we, in the role I have here where I'm trying to coordinate, manage the group as a whole, it allows me to be a little bit more hands-off with players, to sit with players individually, multiple times throughout a season and have a look at them from an objective standpoint, present what data we have to them on where they're at physically at any given time, talk to them about where they see their areas of improvement, talk to them about the feedback I'm getting from coaches about their game and what the coaches want to see them get better at, and then try to get to some specific endpoints that are going to help them achieve that, some specific endpoint goals that are going to help them achieve, the physical level that they or the coaches want them to be at. And it's, for me, really important to have them involved in that. And I'm lucky in the role I have here and the fact that we have a small playing group and we have a fantastic playing group of guys who are really open to this type of discussion, that we can have good, open, honest conversations, consistently throughout the year. So they're all aware exactly where they're at and where they've got to get to.
So when it comes to athletic development of the players that you're currently working with, how do you go about it? And you've mentioned in another article that's coming out later on about the obviously demands of the game and the amount of games that you're playing compared to the amount of time that you're practicing. How do you manage that from an athletic development perspective with that such a fixture kind of fixtures packed in the NBA?
Yeah, obviously it's a challenge. How to create positive athletic development when you're limited in terms of scheduling of sessions. So again, we try to approach it in a very individualized way, and with a smaller squad, that's not too hard to do. But we can look at each player. We can set their goals and where we want them to be, and we can look at the upcoming schedule and have a pretty good idea of when and where each of those players is likely to be under heavier loads and periodise sessions appropriately around that. It's a lot more difficult to do when you've got 4 games, 5 games in a week than it is when you've got 1 game in a week. But that's the life we have, so we work around games, we work around times that suit players. We rarely do a group session as a whole. Almost all our sessions are done one-on-one. And then we try to use the off-season more effectively, and that's something that, typically, in fact, via the players' CBA, we can't ask them to do anything over their off-season. Their off-season is their time, and you get an official 3-week pre-season to work in, which obviously is extremely limiting. But because of the good relationships we have with most of the players, and because the players have mostly bought into what we're trying to achieve, and they understand individually what they're trying to achieve, we can give them good feedback and we can give them good options to work on that, on their specific targets, their specific goals in that time when they're officially off on holidays.
So another thing you mentioned in the second article is about educating and advising without interfering, and that's obviously in terms of coaches. In these kind of windows that you're plugging players into, that maybe the load's not going to be as high. How are you doing them kind of things with the coaches, as in educating and advising without kind of coming across as if you're trying to impose on what they're doing?
Yeah, and that's firstly, if you came here to the Spurs, who are one of the most successful organisations in American sporting history, and have an absolute legend of a coach, and have had a tremendous amount of success, for me to come in and start in any way influencing or trying to change his approach would just not be successful. It wouldn't be appropriate and it wouldn't be successful. So having the coaches on board is really important. And in my opinion, the way we do that is by, it is a process of learning and getting to know them and them getting to know us, and them understanding that the more information that they give us and the closer we work together, the more effective we can do at our job, and them giving information to us about what they want to see from different players, and then us sitting down with them and saying, okay, to get this player where you want them to be, we need to work on X, Y, and Z over this time frame. Now, given our schedule, that means we want to work in this, this component here and the next component next week, and so on. And the more we can have an integrated approach with them, we're far more effective then at getting the work done.
So just moving on to a situation that you obviously find yourself in at the moment, which is recruitment. What do you see? How do you see the high performance team fitting into the kind of recruitment picture?
I think recruitment is first and foremost at the most basic level. It's almost the most important part of any injury prevention program. If you're not recruiting players who are suitable for the sport you're playing, for the schedule you're playing, for the style, technical approach you want to take, it's going to be very difficult to keep those players available to play. So recruitment is really important, and the high performance group should have an influence in that. Now, I qualify that by saying recruitment should always be coach or general manager, depending on your sport and your club, driven. It should always be driven by talent and by team needs. It should never be driven by likelihood of durability. But likelihood of durability in your individual unique situation should be information that's given clearly to those decision makers, to the coach and to the GM, who have to weigh that up against the talent level of any individual they're looking and their possibility to contribute positively to the team. There's no point in me advising them to choose a player because he's got a physical profile that is going to be very durable in our situation if he just doesn't have the talent or he doesn't have the skill set that is going to contribute to the team. The coach may say, well, player X is much more likely for our team to be more beneficial, and we can advise that player X is also maybe more likely to get injured, may struggle with the environment that he's going to come into, the schedule. But we give that advice to the coach, and hopefully the coach takes it on board and he makes a decision based on the overall team needs.
So how difficult is that? Obviously, you explained your situation with regards to getting your hands on certain players before they actually have the potential to be named in your squad. In something like a non-promotion, non-American sport, like a rugby or a football, you're obviously not been able to do that, and you're not going to be able to get your hands on these guys before the coach signs them. You're obviously just going to get minimal data, whether it's looking on the internet for previous history. How did you manage that side of recruitment in the sports that you've previously worked in?
If you don't get direct access to the players, it's obviously more difficult, and you have to qualify any of your recommendations, with the open and honest advice that you're going on the information you've been able to garner. But there's lots of information out there. There's certainly lots of information on players' past history of availability, and that's important to have. Now, that on its own is not the be-all and end-all. You have to consider, if they have been available or unavailable, what were the reasons behind that? Was there particular injuries they have that are likely to be recurrent injuries? Is there any obvious or any likely risk factors that are present, and are they modifiable or are they not? Is the social situation that around a player, the support systems around the player, likely to change when you take him from the environment he's in to the environment you're in? Is the role a player played in a team previously likely to change when you take him from his current team into your team? And how will that affect his physical performance levels or availability levels? So a lot of it is judgment calls, but you've got to look beyond. Your first step is to find out their past history of availability. Then your second step is to delve into that a lot deeper, in every aspect you can find, and it's talking to coaches and players who've played with him and players who've been at that club, and it's having good relationships with other clubs, and spending time when you get a chance going to other clubs and talking to other staff, and the better relationships you have with them, the more you understand their individual environments and how that may differ from yours and how that may affect players who are moving from one to the other. And it's an ongoing process that, the more you can learn about them and the more you can learn about the places they've been and the more you understand about the place you're currently at, the better advice you can give. But, ultimately you're giving a recommendation, on a level of risk of a player. It's not an exact science, and it's not the defining or the deciding factor on whether that player should get signed by the club or not. It's just, it's your expertise or the expertise of your group combined to provide, another vital piece of information that the coach or the general manager can use in making the decision.
Mm-hmm. So we've kind of chatted injury prevention quite a bit, and obviously that's coming onto your second article that I've mentioned a couple of times, and you've got a little a little pyramid there that I'm just seeing in front of me with player recruitment, as we've discussed at the bottom. Do you just want to talk to us about what moves up that pyramid and maybe a bit of information on each one and your kind of views on it?
Yeah, it's something I put together, originally to talk to the GM here about, to give him a good understanding of, how we can be successful long term in keeping, in preventing injuries at a club, and trying to make him understand, or he certainly understood anyway, but trying to make everybody involved understand that, the high performance group, unit, team ultimately takes responsibility for injury prevention. But everyone in the club has a level of influence, and this is the key for everyone to understand, that, the best high performance unit in the world, if they're working in isolation or they're working without support of their coaches or without support of their recruitment team, they won't be the most successful. So the idea of putting the pyramid together was not necessarily to say that, one component of preventing an injury is more important than another, but to say we've got to get the foundations right, and we've got to understand that while we lead the process, while my staff will lead the process and we will educate people and influence people as much as we can, everyone contributes at some stage in this triangle. As you mentioned, it starts with player recruitment, and recruiting or retaining a list of players that are suitable for your individual environment. And certain players may thrive at some teams and may struggle at others, and that may be nothing to do with the performance team. It may be directly to do with the performance team. You just don't know. But sometimes, you can get a handle or some analysis of that, and understanding it as part of understanding that injury prevention starts with recruiting the right list of players or retaining the right list of players is important. The second step up for me is load monitoring. That is a hot topic at the moment. Obviously, there's some people who've done some great work looking at acute versus chronic loads and et cetera, and without a doubt it's extremely important. The reality is that every individual athlete has a level of load that they will break at. Now, for some players, that level of load, and depending on how you want to define it, is extremely high, and for other players, it's low. But understanding that every player has that breaking point, and how firstly we can improve that in every player individually, and then how we can make the coaches understand that level in each individual, and therefore influence them to use them more appropriately, is the next most important step. If we're recruiting great players, but we're putting them under ridiculous loads that certain players clearly aren't going to manage, then whatever else we do isn't going to matter. They're still going to break down. So, you get your player list right, you get your load monitoring systems right, and, clearly that's, a podcast or 20 on its own to discuss the pros and cons of the best way to do that. And, that's not what I'm here to do. But, that's for me the next step. The next step up the pyramid is, you've got your players, you're managing their loads well, is trying to improve that through athletic development. Fitter, stronger players are less likely to get injured. You can improve their load tolerance by making them better athletes. And clearly, that's your strength and conditioning team and your sports science team take the lead in that. And it's vitally important in preventing injury. From there, and this will probably, could probably stir a bit of debate. I put that as a foundation for movement efficiency. Moving in an efficient way can clearly make you less susceptible to injury. Now, a lot of people would argue that they should be reversed, that if you can't move in an efficient way first, you shouldn't be you shouldn't be focused on developing them athletically, and they can make a reasonable point. I understand that. My personal opinion and my personal experience is that some players who don't move well can still cope very well. But if a player is not fit enough or strong enough, they will almost certainly break down. And that's how I reason having athletic development as the third step in the period, and then moving to a movement efficiency. But certainly in an integrated professional elite sporting team, improving players' movement efficiency is vital, and it's something we spend a lot of time on. From there, you've selected the right players, you manage their loads well, you've made them better athletes, you've made them more efficient. Your next step is to consider, is there advantage in structured injury prevention programs? And that really depends very much on your environment. If you're doing a lot of your other things well, they may become a little bit superfluous because you might have covered a lot of the issues that they're addressing through your other programs, through your movement efficiency or your athletic development or your load monitoring programs. Any situation, but any club in the world in any sport, they're never perfect, and no matter what people want to say about their clubs, and I'll openly say it about all the clubs I've been at, none of them are perfect. And getting adherence to certain programs, getting exposures to certain exercises that have proven preventative effects can be difficult, even in an elite environment where players are full-time and getting paid big money and you've got lots of staff. It can still be difficult. So if you're having problems with getting the amount of exposures you need, then integrating some structured injury prevention programs can be an effective way to do that, as part of a warm-up or a cool-down or a team program. Moving further up, and you get into your injury assessment and injury rehabilitation. Now, this is at the top of the triangle because obviously this is after injury has occurred, but it's a big part of injury prevention still because, when an injury has occurred, it doesn't necessarily mean that player is missing time. But managing those players to keep their performance levels at a level which they can still contribute positively to the team and without putting them at risk of making their injury worse, managing those well, and if you can do those two at the same time, you can keep them playing, you can keep their performance levels up, and you can not make their injury worse, then that's a really successful injury management, injury assessment, rehab management technique, and that prevents further problems in the future. And at the very tip of the triangle, and again, this is one that might people may disagree with, but luck. I think it's a small component. I think if you do everything very well over a longer period of time, the teams who have the best programs will get the best results. But like everything in life, shit happens. People get injured. Everything can't have been done perfectly. You've got to go back and examine why they got injured. You've got to accept and acknowledge any mistakes you made and try and address them in the future. But life is life, and sometimes things happen. And again, I'm a little bit skeptical of anyone in my role or any strength conditioning coach or any physio who says that luck plays zero part. I think we need to admit it plays a small part.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for that. Appreciate that going down that pyramid. So just to hit on the movement efficiency block that you've got pretty much kind of halfway down. What's your views on how that's assessed? Maybe a global view, not going into too much detail what you guys do.
Well, it's a controversial topic.
That's why I chose it.
For me, my personal view is that it's a subjective measurement, and there's always error or issues with subjective measurement. I understand there's a lot of systems out there that try to make it more objective, and I've used a number of them, and we still use probably a bastardization of a number of them, and the philosophies of our own staff here now, because trying to be more objective is a good thing, and we all want to be more objective. My personal opinion is ultimately that's a subjective judgment. That's an individual coaching technique, by the people working with them in the gym, by the physios working with them in the treatment room. So I don't like to assess them in terms of putting a number on that and using that number to in any way predict injury. That's, my personal opinion is that's a road that I'm not convinced is leading to success.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just really conscious of time, because I know you're in a busy period at the minute. Another thing you mentioned in your first article with regards to the high performance team was the difficulty in aligning yourself with technical and tactical goals. How involved are you when it comes to trying to align your practices with the kind of the targets and the aims of the technical staff?
I think we're getting better and better. Clearly, that comes through a process of integration with the technical staff, with the coaching staff, and I try to learn as much as I can from them about what they're trying to achieve as a team and what they're trying to achieve from each individual player within that team. And then I try to question them on well, how can we contribute to that? What can we do with this player to make him more effective in the way you want to use him? And I think when you pose it to most coaches that way, they understand that I'm not trying to influence how that player is used in any way. I'm not trying to change how that player is used. All I'm trying to do is understand what they want of a player in a particular situation, and then taking from that, how I can help train him to be able to achieve that in the best possible way and the safest possible way. So it's an ongoing process of learning from the coaches and of them learning that we're there to serve them, we're there to help them by giving them the players who can do what they require in the technical and tactical way that they want to approach the game.
So was there, when you came into the NBA, obviously it's your first kind of foray into basketball, how long was your kind of bedding in period that you actually got familiar with the sport and the demands and felt comfortable in that environment?
Oh, I mean, it's ongoing. The first year, everything that we wanted to do was new for the club, so that takes time. And we made a deliberate approach to introduce things slowly because we wanted to integrate them well. We didn't want to come in and make big changes and particularly because we're coming into a team that's had such a great amount of success. But I think it's the right approach anyway is to be incremental and to make sure people understand why we want to make changes when we do. For me personally, I'm continuing to learn. I'm learning more about the sport every day, and I've been, on a basketball court every single day for the last 2.5 years, and there's still every single day I'm learning something new. But I'm lucky that some of the staff we have here in my team are very experienced in basketball, and I'm lucky that we have one of the best coaching groups in world sport, and they're more than happy to sit and share their views on the game and how we can contribute to that. And I constantly qualify. Nearly every conversation I have with a coach, starts with, "Listen, I don't know anything about basketball, but this is what we would like to see, this player do. Will this help him do what you need him to do? Or you tell me what you need him to do. Okay, if we do X, Y, and Z, we might be able to do that better." And generally, that works okay.
Mm-hmm. How does that, on the flip side of that, are you obviously in an environment where that kind of long-term approach is possible? Obviously, in some instances, you may or may not have been involved, but that long-term approach, almost, I'm not saying it isn't doable, but because of the pressures, and so I'm just taking the Premier League because it's happening in the minute, or the Euros are happening in the minute. That maybe long-term approach isn't possible because results dictate that if changes aren't made, you're going to last 5 games or 10 games.
Yeah. No, I mean, I understand that, and I've been in that situation, and having spent a lot of time in football, and that's one of the benefits here is, it's a unique club that they're willing to take a longer approach, and that's, to be fair, the reason they've had such sustained success over the last 20 years, But my thoughts now, when I was younger, I would have been more inclined to feel that pressure and be in a rush to implement everything you wanted to do. I think I've learned with experience that that's just not going to be successful, So you really have no choice but to be systematic and to be incremental. And if you are process driven and you can explain and you can show with objective data where you're making changes and how that's going to be successful, then you put yourself in a good position to buy time for those changes to take effect. If you're at a club that don't allow that time to happen, then there really isn't a lot you can do. You can try to rush everything all at once, and you might be lucky and maybe your team over exceeds in a particular season and it gives you more time. But the reality is that when you do rush everything in at once, you're probably going to end up losing a bunch of things that you want to do long term, because it's not possible to make them all successful at one hit. So for me, no matter what environment I was, I think I would set out that this is the process we want to go through. This is where we want to be. This is how we're going to implement things over a period of time, and we're going to do it in a way to try and ensure that each one is successful, as opposed to trying to hit everything all at once, because for me it's a recipe for not achieving long-term success.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, like I said 10 minutes ago, I'm quite conscious of time because I know you're a busy guy. Where can people keep up to date with what you've got going on, Phil? Are you on Twitter? And
I'm on Twitter, mate, but to be honest, I don't contribute a whole lot. I tend to read everyone else's ideas.
Voyeur, a Twitter voyeur.
I make a little bit of an effort every now and again, but I'm at Phil Coles Physio. And I'm happy to, if anyone wants to contact me, I'm more than happy to try to, build relationships and talk to as many people from as many different sports as possible, because we can all learn from each other. Obviously, it's time dependent. Everyone's busy. People can contact me via Twitter, and wherever possible, I'll try to build a relationship and learn from each other. But I can't promise that I'm weekly tweeting out any words of wisdom that are going to be of great help to people.
So that first article that I mentioned, that's still out in the open that I can link to on the site?
Yes, I guess so. It's on the Leads in Performance site. You can link that. That's no problem. And it's a fairly philosophical approach. But it outlines my views on keeping our different specialties together and making us work together in the most effective way.
And when's that second injury prevention article looking to be out?
It's going through a review process at the moment. It'll probably be out in the next month or so, hopefully.
Okay, cool. Well, I appreciate your time, Phil, and I'll let you get back to your glass box.
Thank you, mate.
All right, mate. Take care. See you, mate.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye, bye. Thanks for tuning in to episode 95 of the Pacey Performance Podcast. Hope you enjoyed the chat with Phil. If you want to keep up to date with everything else that's going on with the podcast, some great guests coming over the next couple of weeks, you can follow me on Twitter at Pacey Perform, and all the information with who's coming up next, what episodes are out, etc. will be on there. So thanks again for tuning in, your continued support, and I'll speak to you soon.